On a heavy June evening in 2014, the final sunlight of Florida stretched low across the flat sawgrass horizon, painting the Everglades in hues of amber and green. The asphalt near the national park entrance still radiated the day's heat. Ayara Connolly shifted impatiently against the hood of her car, checking her phone again. The glowing numbers told her it was past 8 o'clock. Her daughter, 28-year-old Roisin Kalan, and her 6-month-old grandson, Tyran, were supposed to be back an hour ago. She had dropped them off that morning for a quiet day of walking the boardwalk trails, a refuge for Roisin to clear her head after long nursing shifts and the weight of single motherhood. By now, the bustling lot was almost empty, save for a few ranger vehicles and a choir of cicadas screaming into the humid night. When the 6th phone call went to voicemail, dread tightened in her chest. Roisin was not irresponsible. She was the kind of young mother who packed IV-style amounts of water, doubled the baby's diapers, and left detailed notes for even short babysitting shifts. With a widow's resilience, she organized her days strictly. Losing track of time or letting her phone die didn't fit that picture. Determined, Ayara hurried to the ranger station, gravel crunching under her shoes. Inside, the cool air clashed with her rising panic as she explained that her daughter and grandson had not returned. Ranger Davies listened, then immediately began radioing other staff. He asked logical questions about supplies, routes, history. Ayara explained how Roisin loved structure and was cautious in the outdoors. She had on a bright yellow sundress that morning, Tyran strapped warmly against her chest in a sling, both smiling for a snapshot next to the park sign. It had looked like the start of something wholesome. Now it was the beginning of something dreadful. By nightfall, floodlights and patrol cars replaced the quiet dusk. A missing persons report was filed. From the first dawn, the search was overwhelming. Helicopters scattered low grids using thermal scopes, airboats scanned waterways, and ground crews combed through trails, calling Roisin's name in voices the swamp swallowed. Though the boardwalk paths were popular and frequented by tourists, no one had noticed a woman and an infant disappear. K-9 units tried to track a scent from the lot, but the sheer traffic and swamp smells shrouded everything. Detectives examined her phone records, confirming her mobile last pinged near the entrance that morning before vanishing into silence. For days, the sun rose relentlessly high, punishing the rescuers with humidity that soaked their clothes. They pressed on through sawgrass fields, hammocks of thick cypress, and mosquito-infested shallows. Yet they found nothing. No shoe, no fabric from the yellow dress, no dropped bottle or pacifier. The Everglades were vast, but people always left traces. Here it was as if Roisin and Tyran had evaporated into the hot air. On the 3rd day, as search teams prepared to push into rougher trails beyond the tourist loops, Detective Jasper Mallory announced a grim setback. A supposed pesticide spill from adjacent agricultural land had contaminated sections of the park. Regulations barred human searchers and dogs from entering those areas until declared safe. Veteran rangers argued they could handle gear and risks, that no bureaucratic rules should outweigh a 6-month-old's life. Mallory shut them down. The restricted zone devoured a crucial section near the entrance roads. Searchers were forced deeper into the wilderness, chasing a theory that Roisin had wandered far out of range. After 2 crushing weeks, the massive multi-agency effort was wound down. The official explanation, neat and unsatisfying, was that the mother and infant succumbed to the wilderness. Perhaps heat stroke or animals took them, and the elements erased the rest. With no evidence, officials placed the file in cold storage. For Ayara, it was unbearable. Her gut said her daughter hadn't vanished by chance. The silence itself was suspicious. A year crawled by. Then, in June 2015, python hunters venturing far across the marshlands spotted a monster Burmese python stretched on a rock. At over 16 feet, it was thick as an oil drum, its midsection grotesquely swollen by a recent meal. To the hunters, such a catch was valuable, and they brought it to a station where biologists dissected snakes to log their diets. They expected deer bones or a wild hog. Instead, as knives cut open the stretched belly, the fluorescent lights revealed pale, unmistakably human flesh. Legs, an arm, a partial torso. The DNA results were immediate. The python had ingested the missing woman, Roisin Cullen. For Ira, the news was like being struck by lightning, horror blended with grim confirmation. But new mysteries towered. There was no trace of the baby. More alarming, forensic experts noticed that the tissues were oddly well preserved. Under a microscope, cell walls had ruptures consistent not with a year of swamp rot, but with something eerily artificial, the effect of being frozen solid and then thawed. Someone had stored Roisin's body in a freezer, dismembered it, and only recently dumped it in the Everglades. The python had merely become an accidental accomplice to disclosure. With that revelation, the case was reborn. A cold case detective, Elena Ruiz, combed back through every file from 2014. What caught her attention was the alleged pesticide spill that had sealed off land from the first search. Checking with the Environmental Protection Agency, she discovered no such spill was ever reported. State records were empty. Even the agricultural contractor named in reports did not exist. The chemical contamination was fiction. Someone had fabricated it deliberately to misdirect the search. Further digging traced the lie directly back to Detective Jasper Mallory. Financial audits revealed suspicious cash deposits beginning the week after the disappearance. The funds were laundered through shell businesses, but eventually, the money trail led to a company with ties to a powerful name in Florida, Orion Vance, a wealthy real estate developer with acreage bordering the park. Vance was notorious for ruthless dealings, hunting privileges, and political donations. What did this titan of luxury developments and swampfront estates have to do with a missing nurse? While investigators puzzled that through, news from abroad added a chilling dimension. In Eastern Europe, Interpol raids cracked open a trafficking syndicate known for orchestrating illicit adoptions. Buried in their digital files was a record of an American infant smuggled from Florida in June 2014, described as male, approximately 6 months old. The client was kept anonymous, but paid handsomely. Cross-checking financial flows, investigators found transfers from a Delaware shell company, Osprey Holdings Group, controlled by none other than Orion Vance. The likely horror crystallized. Roisin had been murdered, her body hidden in a freezer, while her infant son had been trafficked overseas. Mallory's false pesticide story had bought time for the concealment. Pressure squeezed the detective, and under interrogation, Mallory broke. He confessed Vance had paid him to steer search crews away from a service road where Roisin had last been seen. He admitted to repeated cash bribes structured over months. With his testimony, investigators obtained warrants to raid Vance's sprawling estate at the edge of the Everglades. At dawn, armored personnel and helicopters swarmed the manicured compound. They found Orion calmly in his study, cuffed without a fight. His son, Cameron, however, fled in panic on an off-road vehicle, racing across the swamp until cornered and tackled by tactical teams. Inside the estate, investigators uncovered the evidence everyone feared yet needed. A concealed walk-in freezer, industrial grade, hidden behind a false wall in the basement. Though recently scrubbed of contents and reeking faintly of bleach, luminol testing illuminated glowing stains. Samples pulled from seals and drains matched Roisin's DNA. This was where her body had been preserved for nearly a year before its disposal. Questioned separately, Cameron cracked. His story spilled haltingly, a mixture of guilt and panic. Drunk and joyriding one night in June 2014, he had driven recklessly down an access road while carrying hunting gear. He struck a young woman suddenly on the path, Roisin, with the infant strapped to her chest. She collapsed, unconscious and bleeding, while the baby cried but unhurt. In terror, Cameron phoned his father. According to his confession, Orion arrived and surveyed the scene as coldly as he surveyed land acquisitions. Rather than risk his son facing prison for vehicular manslaughter and underage hunting, he took control. He loaded both woman and infant into his vehicle, drove them back to his walled estate, and ended Roisin's life to silence witnesses. He placed her in the walk-in freezer to contain the evidence. Detective Mallory was contacted and bought with cash, instructed to invent an obstacle that would redirect search efforts. For the baby, Orion sought a permanent solution. Through criminal networks, he arranged to pass Tyrone to the trafficking syndicate that specialized in illegal adoptions abroad. Weeks later, Tyrone was gone. Roisin's body remained encased in ice while the public forgot, until Vance finally had it dismembered, disposed of in the swamp, and fatefully consumed by a python. Their confessions, combined with the freezer evidence, the money trail, and Mallory's collaboration, sealed the case. Murder, obstruction, conspiracy, and child trafficking were leveled against the Vances. For Adara, the truth was horrifying, yet clarity replaced the void of not knowing. But one desperate question remained. Was Tyrone still alive? Interpol's seized records offered hope. Following the smuggling routes, they identified the adoptive family abroad. The child had been presented as abandoned, the family unaware of the crime masked beneath paperwork. In an international effort blending diplomacy, custody hearings, and criminal clearances, the boy was finally located in 2017. He was 3 years old, healthy, living abroad, unaware of the tragedy tied to his earliest months. Arrangements were made to reunite him with his grandmother. Adara traveled overseas, heart pounding through each airport checkpoint until the final door opened and a social worker guided a small boy. His hair, his eyes, his expression. It was Roisin all over again. The weight of 3 dark years lifted. On her knees, sobbing, she opened her arms, and her grandson walked into them. Back in Florida, justice ran its course. Orion and Cameron Vance were sentenced to long years in prison, stripped of the privileges money usually bought. Detective Mallory joined them behind bars, a fallen officer marked by corruption. The baby who was meant to vanish into international shadows had returned. Adara brought Tyrone home, determined to raise him with the love that had fueled her fight and to honor the memory of her daughter who, in life and death, had protected her child. The Everglades remain indifferent, a wilderness swallowing history. But in this case, its most feared predator, the python, became the unlikely key to revealing a hidden crime, its grotesque appetite unearthing what human ambition wanted forever concealed. Out of that nightmare, a child was rescued, a conspiracy shattered, and one grandmother secured the fragile but enduring hope her daughter had died to preserve.